Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to our daily morning coffee time. Today is September the 1st, 2020. And I've been feeling and sensing a lot of the signs of the shift into fall here at the Pacific Hermitage. There's a few more dead leaves to pick up every day. And some shifting temperatures, although it's still summery warm right now. But how is everything looking and sounding this morning to everyone? We had some problems yesterday. I've shut down a lot of different things today, so hopefully everything is looking and sounding good. I have about 50 of our friends here already this morning. Okay, and thank you. I'm seeing the signs that people can see and hear well enough that we shall proceed with the morning. A few announcements while everyone's maybe still getting their stream on. So I did manage to check over and finalize a post for our website yesterday. So there's some new news over at pacifichermitage.org. And if people are on our email list, when a new post gets put up, you should get automatically an email notifying you about that in the early mornings of the day, West Coast time. So check your inbox or visit pacifichermitage.org for a little bit of news and update. We try to get something up there at least once a month, letting people know what's going on. And as I mentioned yesterday, our friend Ladawan has made these very timely commemorative masks. Who would want to forget the summer of the coronavirus? So, and those who live near enough to the Hermitage that might be making a visit or want to pop by and grab one, we have these available for free, and would love to give you this collector's item. For those who are interested in getting one for themselves, a lot of ones agreed to send them if people can cover the postage. So in the web post, there is a contact for her and a few details. So I think she had maybe about 400 made. So there's a few available. She brought something like 160 down for us to give out here, and she's got a little over 200 available up there. So check those things out. I'm going to endeavor to give a bit more attention to some questions today. Thing I was thinking about this morning, and then I see there's a question that somewhat relates to this, is I'd read something recently. It's been a crazy year, and especially here in America, there's a great deal of division and strife, and people are looking upon one another sometimes with not the kindly eye that the Buddha recommends. And there's a lot of critical re-examination of various aspects of our politics and our culture. And just reading, came across something the other day where somebody was giving this encouragement, like to remember to establish love in your heart before you criticize another. And it was like one of those little gems of truth that you can't be reminded of enough. And it aligns with something that exists within our own tradition of the practice of Buddhism. It's actually a fair amount. of praise given for admonishing one another, especially sort of in the monastic community and in the relationship between a mentor and his student, or a teacher and his student, but also like amongst peers. And, it's something that myself and others struggle with. And there's some very helpful guidelines given, things to consider. I think there's a couple suttas in the numerical sayings of the Buddha in the group of the fives. And one of them we even have in this little handbook that most of the monks have in the monastery. And it's a frequent theme of conversation. Unfortunately, the default in the world is most people only offer feedback and criticism when motivated by hatred and frustration. And sometimes it's been building up. We've accumulated perceptions of how others are going wrong, or treating us in ways that are unskillful. And if we're not skilled in relationships, skilled in communication and offering feedback in the appropriate way, it oftentimes doesn't have good results. So there's some guidelines that I've always kind of found helpful, and one of them is to make sure you establish yourself in loving kindness and compassion. So, and that it's coming with a kindness for the other person. And I would maybe add sincere, because sometimes our own sense of righteousness and indignation can fuel a kind of pseudo-kindness, like, this is good for you. But it should be coming from genuine kindness. And that's why this thing I tripped across the other day, just make sure to establish a heart of love before you criticize. And I think this applies to self as well as to others. Many of us have habits of being overly self-critical. So ground oneself in love and kindness. Also attentive to time and place. Make sure it's timely and appropriate before criticizing or offering feedback. Make sure what one says is true and speak to the truth. And be very careful to speak to the truth. Oftentimes that's where we go off the rails. Bit of exaggeration. Speak gentle words, and in a manner that is gentle and not harsh. And another factor that I find very critical to reflect on, especially before deciding whether or not you should give feedback or criticism to another, is that it's motivated and directed, and there's a sense of discernment that it's for the benefit of the other. And there's an aspect of this which is discerning that it can be of benefit to the other. So there's other teachings and suttas on speech where the Buddha sort of says, if your wisdom, your own sort of intuition and discernment tells you that, well, you might say something for the right reasons and it's true and it's timely, but there's a sense that the other person will not be able to receive that or make some sort of beneficial adjustment or change based on that criticism or feedback, then one should seriously consider not speaking. So, and maybe it doesn't, in some cases it's maybe not going to produce immediate benefit. Maybe some's not quite in the place where they will be able to appropriately kind of receive it and make good use of it. But maybe there's a sense that it's something that they eventually can come to. Interesting enough, the Buddha, I think one of the things that prevents us or holds us back in sharing admonishment and feedback oftentimes is the fear of having a difficult conversation. And the Buddha explicitly says this is not in his consideration. It's not part of his motivational structure for whether or not he admonishes or not. The mere fact that it'd be difficult to say something or uncomfortable, or that there might be uncomfortable feelings, is not something that he says a good person is overly motivated by. So, and I think if I look at my own tendencies and a lot of what I observe out there in the world, oftentimes much of the criticism feedback we get is motivated by something other than a feeling of love and a clear discernment of it being timely and for one's benefit. And then a lot of the admonishment and feedback that we should get that we don't is because a person who might offer us that treasure, that gem, hold up a mirror, help us see what maybe we can't see so clearly, is afraid of the pain of that kind of interaction or how you might react. And I've noticed myself living in community, monastic community for many years, it's a lot easier to offer feedback when the relationship is good, and also when the other person is a kind, generous soul who's sincerely intent on living in harmony with others and working to become a more skillful person. And when there's somebody who's strongly grounded in loving kindness, it's just so much easier to figure out the timing and to discern one's own role and how necessary it might be to sort of offer some admonishment, criticism, feedback, and then not feel fear or intimidation that would prevent one from doing so. So there's a few considerations in a time where people are throwing all kinds of barbed words at each other, and there's a whole lot of criticism going around. And in general, that's something I've struggled with myself, a tendency to being even very self-critical. So just looping back and emphasizing, like, ground your criticisms in love, in truth, and with a sense of benefit. So early on, setting up the stream, our good friend Eleanor, who's a very faithful participant here, offered this question, which kind of just crystallized my earlier thoughts about offering feedback. Sometimes I catch myself making fun or criticizing people in my head, especially with my dad. Should I just note the thoughts in my head or do something to prevent and correct this? So, the best advice from the Buddhist teachings is not to merely note it. There is a way sometimes that we can, like when we recognize that that's not a neutral mental, emotional experience, Eleanor, that a mere recognition of that, which we might call noting, helps check a unskillful reaction or an unskillful motivation that might be grounded in that habit. But the Buddha doesn't praise inaction. He praises bringing kind of unskillful emotions and thoughts to resolution. So, and investigating why such things are there, and experimenting with how it is that we can skillfully sort of respond to those is an important part in becoming a better person. And as I popped in the chat, these can oftentimes just mask our own subtle habits of anger and aversion. So we generate a good deal of tanha, or desire for people to be other than they are, to act in ways that we find agreeing and pleasable, and our frustrated desire oftentimes can be a source for these types of feelings. We need to grow our ability to notice those forms of tanha and desire, and how they can lead to a steady stream of nutriment for our habits of anger and frustration. There's this notion in the Buddhist teaching that greed, hatred, and delusion, which are the groupings, the major groupings of the emotional afflictions, the defilements, these things don't exist independently. They exist based on nutriment. And the more we allow ourselves to exercise thoughts of ill will, frustration, anger, meanness, that we're feeding those very tendencies in ourselves and strengthening those very tendencies. With every act of restraint, like trying to resolve those things and replace them with more skillful ways of being and thinking and speaking, not only are we weakening them, those tendencies of mind and heart, but strengthening wholesome ones. Can you share your thoughts on this? From In the Buddha's Words by Bhikkhu Bodhi. Let's see, I must have missed an earlier question. In the suttas, the Buddha said, with the cessation of name and form comes the cessation of consciousness. And with the cessation of consciousness comes the cessation of name and form. Well, I'd have to see a bit more of the context of that, Abby, but I think that's a very subtle teaching called dependent origination. So maybe you can email me some more details and I can comment on that at a different time. It's a teaching that kind of goes into a very detailed analysis of how ignorance leads to suffering, and with the cessation of ignorance, how suffering ceases to be. So that's the big frame to contemplate teachings like that with. Good morning, Shelley. Is it akusala to see the other as deluded? Not at all. If somebody is under the influence of delusion, our ability to sort of recognize that is very skillful, and it helps us adjust and respond in skillful ways. One should be clear-sighted enough to know how much delusion goes into that assessment, or how clear-minded we are in making that assessment. So, but yeah, sometimes you can see delusion operating in another person very kind of clearly, and it's good to contemplate these things internally and externally, and especially with delusion, it's hard to see our own delusion. So, if one is well grounded in the teachings of the Buddha and well practiced, you can start to kind of see that clearly in others. Sometimes in a way that's difficult to examine in one's own mind. So it's good to keep the anicca factor alive. It's not sure, it's not certain, but you might sort of recognize that somebody is under the influence of delusion. I always say don't ever dial up your certainty to 100%. No matter how certain you feel. Ajahn, how to encourage oneself to stick to the Dhamma in a non-Dhammic environment, dorm life, etc. I feel an indeliberate pressure from my surroundings to wander off the path. Well, it's difficult, Adil. I mean, there's plenty there that's in the there's plenty there that in the suttas, where the Buddha talks about just the importance of good friends, not associating with fools, and also even environment, seeking good environments. Like part of the reason why the monks were homeless wanderers in the time of the Buddha was it afforded them the freedom to seek out good situations for them to get the basics of life through free will donations from the community, but not be stuck in an environment in any long-term durable way that might be compromising their ability to practice. And there's several teachings where the Buddha talks about, if one, how to evaluate a good environment for oneself, even as a monk or a serious practitioner. And the Buddha says, if you're able to get, the most important consideration there is if you find that your practice is going well, stay there. If you have enough basic support. If you're finding your practice is not going well, then seek a different environment. So, and I just raise that as a sense of trying to grow some sort of sensitivity or acceptance of how it's not all about you and your own strengths. I mean, environment does play a strong role and presents a strong kind of challenge to us, manifesting the kind of habits that we would like, the skillfulness that we would like. So, and for my friends who are not monastics, and for some of them who were monastics and then returned to lay life, I have a profound sense of how difficult it is when Dhamma is really important in one's life, how difficult it is to create and maintain a supportive environment for that. So do the best you can. One is to maybe through adjusting who it is that you spend time with, what it is you give your attention to, making certain commitments that you push yourself to live up to. Like maybe a certain amount of listening to Dhamma, reading Dhamma, practicing Dhamma. So that you're kind of feeding that, which helps support and feed the motivation that you have for practicing and living Dhamma. What we attend to has a very strong and profound effect on our mind. So just listening to a little bit of Dhamma or reading a little bit of Dhamma every day can have a a good and beneficial effect. And then just being very, very judicious and discerning about choices that you make. And then acknowledge that environment has an important thing. So don't be overly idealistic about how the environment might kind of play into your ability at this point in your life to establish a more strong kind of Dhammic environment for yourself. Back to Eleanor's question here. So should we stop watering the seeds of hatred by noting, it says nothing the thoughts, but I think you meant noting the thoughts and forcing ourselves to produce kind thoughts? Forcing ourselves, at least at first? Yes, stop watering the seeds. Stop feeding the monster. And then it's difficult to force oneself to feel love and kindness, or thoughts of kindness. So, the first step is just resolving and restraining from feeding the beast or watering the seeds as you have here. So, and then if you can inspire and incline the mind, and it doesn't have to be some explosive, emotional, effusive sense of love and kindness, just well-wishing, especially for people in your family or whatnot. There you must have a certain amount of goodwill and love for them, and the ability to sort of generate a sense of may they be well. So even amidst anger and ill will, it shouldn't be too difficult just to bring up a thought of, well, may they be well. It's like somebody's being crazy, unskillful, shouting and screaming at you. You can stop and restrain any kind of movement towards anger, generating your own sort of angry emotional response. Restrain yourself from thinking thoughts of ill will. Restrain yourself from speaking and acting, especially based on thoughts like that. And then just say internally, may they be well. It's obviously they're suffering. If they're doing something skillful, or if they're angry or something like this. If they're frustrated, they're angry, it's obvious they're suffering. So then just to generate, it's like, well, may they be free from that soon. May that anger subside. So just even something like this, or if it's like a durable habit that they have that's unbeautiful, unskillful, then you can maybe generate a wish that someday they may be free of that. Not so much for your benefit, for their benefit. Like, may they be free of that. Okay, friends. Well, since we are back to daily morning coffee times, I'm going to leave it at that for today. It is 8:30 now. Thank you all for showing up and sharing your good cheer and encouragement with each other. And thank you for the questions. So fall is approaching. So make sure to get out and soak up the sunshine if it's out. Get some fresh air. Charge up your vitamin D stores. Well, you can. It might be I declared at the beginning of summer that I was expecting it would be a bumpy summer, and it might be a dark winter. So don't let this opportunity slip by you. Also, one last reminder: we have restarted doing a little live streaming of our pujas. So this morning we had morning meditation and chanting that we live stream. We'll keep that going for a while. So if that's of use for people to help you make a commitment to get up a little bit earlier and practice some chanting, please make use of that. And that'll be up for a day or so. There'll be at least one of those sessions up there on our YouTube channel. So if the morning isn't your thing, you could replay those later and practice chanting and sitting. So be well, friends. I will see you all tomorrow. Have a good day and go forth with love and kindness into the world. Bye for now.